an illegal modification, a rogue engineer, and a Japanese convoy that never saw it coming. This is the story of how one man, Paul Pappy Gunn, took matters into his own hands during World War II, rewrote the rules of aerial warfare, and created the ultimate ship killer. Not with a new fleet, not with a secret government project, but with guts, grief, and a few power tools. It starts with a desperate man in a desperate war. Gunn wasn't just a military pilot or engineer, he was a father who had watched Japanese forces capture his family in the Philippines.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
That grief didn't slow him down. It turned him into a one-man revolution. If the official channels were too slow or too cautious to act, then he would do it himself. Whatever it took to turn the tide and end the war faster. Now, you have to understand what he did wasn't just bold. It was flat out unauthorized. Gunn began modifying B-25 Mitchell bombers without official approval. The military had their protocols, their processes, their stay-in-your-lane mentality. But Gunn, he saw a bomber that could become something far more lethal. Something that could strike low, hit hard, and leave no room for survival. He wasn't just tinkering, he was weaponizing. The traditional B-25 was designed for medium-altitude bombing. But that wasn't going to cut it in the Pacific, where naval convoys moved fast, covered tight, and didn't give second chances. Gunn's idea: rip out the old front end and mount 8 forward-facing .50 caliber machine guns. That's not a minor tweak. That's transforming a bomber into a flying death machine. He called it the Strafer, and once it was airborne, nothing on the ocean's surface was safe. Ships couldn't hide. Anti-aircraft crews didn't have time to react. These modified bombers came in low, sprayed firepower, and then dropped bombs right into the decks of Japanese vessels. And here's the kicker: Gunn didn't just rely on brute force. He brought tactical genius into the mix. He introduced a new method called skip bombing, where bombs were released at low altitudes to literally bounce across the water before slamming into enemy ships at the waterline. The same way you'd skip a stone across a lake. Except instead of a stone, it was a 500-pound explosive. And instead of a lake, it was a war zone. That technique changed everything. High-altitude bombing had been a gamble at sea, too inaccurate, too easy to miss. But skip bombing, combined with the forward gun strafing runs, it made these B-25s absolutely devastating. This all came to a head at the Battle of the Bismarck Sea in 1943. A Japanese convoy was moving to reinforce Leh, loaded with troops, equipment, and escorts. Allied codebreakers had intercepted the plan. Gunn's modified aircraft were ready. What followed wasn't just an attack, it was a slaughter. In broad daylight, Gunn's low-flying Strafer B-25s ripped through the convoy. The forward guns suppressed enemy gunners on the ships. Then came the skip bombs, bouncing off the waves and slamming into hulls like battering rams. Ship after ship went down. 8 transports, 4 destroyers. Thousands of Japanese troops were killed before they ever reached land. After that, Japan stopped sending large convoys during the day. It wasn't worth the risk. Gunn's tactics had forced them into the shadows, relying on night movements and submarines. Their entire supply strategy in the Pacific had to change. That's how much damage one man's illegal idea caused. But let's be real, this wasn't some clean-cut military victory with medals and fanfare. Gunn had broken protocol. He wasn't exactly following orders. He was bending, breaking, and reshaping them. The Air Force bureaucracy didn't love that. At first, there was no official recognition. No shiny title. Just a man covered in grease, working through trial and error, balancing aircraft weight, aligning multiple machine guns, and stress testing every piece himself. This wasn't innovation on a whiteboard, it was wrench turning, wing cutting, live-fire experimentation. And it worked. Behind the scenes, Gunn was doing complex math and hard engineering. Modifying the nose of a plane isn't like adding a spoiler to a car. These were structural changes with major weight and balance implications. Multiple guns meant recoil had to be accounted for, harmonized, and tested repeatedly. And none of this had official funding or resources. He was literally building the future of warfare by hand. And it didn't stop there. His Strafer concept didn't fade after World War II. It laid the foundation for future gunship designs. You want to talk legacy? Look at Vietnam, where dedicated gunships like the AC-47 and AC-130 carried forward the same philosophy: overwhelming forward firepower, low-altitude attacks, and multi-role aircraft that could adapt to any target.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
What Gunn built wasn't just a weapon, it was a playbook. Eventually, the military did come around. They had to. You can't ignore results like that. General George Kenney, commander of the Allied Air Forces in the Southwest Pacific, later wrote a biography about Gunn, helping bring his story to light. And years later, a U.S. Air Force training facility was named in his honor. But for most of the war, he didn't wait for a pat on the back. He just kept building. There's something hauntingly human about his story, too. This wasn't innovation for the sake of ego or glory. Gunn was driven by loss. His family had been taken. He wanted them back. Every modified plane, every downed convoy, every new weapon, it was all aimed at ending the war faster, at forcing the enemy into retreat, at getting home. That's what makes his work hit different. This wasn't sanitized strategy from a boardroom. It was real, personal, and driven by stakes far beyond any promotion or headline. And it worked because he was willing to take risks that others weren't, to trust instinct over bureaucracy, to push boundaries when the alternative was watching more soldiers die from bad tactics and outdated tech. It's easy to talk about military innovation like it's a committee decision, like every change needs a vote. But some of the most game-changing moments in history come from individuals who just do it anyway. Gunn didn't ask for permission. He made results impossible to ignore. He showed that tactics matter as much as technology. That sometimes it's not about having the best weapon, it's about using what you've got in the smartest, most brutal way possible. And he showed that one person, pushed to their limit, can reshape the battlefield without ever waiting for the green light. Gunn's legacy isn't just in the planes or the tactics. It's in the message. Wartime innovation doesn't always come from the top down. Sometimes, it comes from a man in a hangar, staring at a bomber, thinking, what if we did it differently? And for the Japanese Navy at the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, that difference was the last thing they ever saw. If stories like this blow your mind even half as much as they blew holes through enemy ships, then don't forget to hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. Got thoughts on wartime innovation or favorite military rule breakers? Let's hear it. Let's talk about what really happened after the smoke cleared. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea wasn't just a tactical win, it was a seismic shift. Gunn's modified B-25s didn't just sink ships, they obliterated Japan's confidence in daylight operations. Before this battle, the Imperial Japanese Navy believed convoys were relatively safe under the sun. Afterward, they abandoned the daylight completely. From then on, they were crawling across the ocean at night, dodging American recon planes like rats in the dark. That kind of reaction, that's not strategy. That's fear. Gunn had engineered fear into the sky. And yet, back at base, Gunn wasn't basking in glory. He wasn't posing in front of his strafer bombers for newsreels or soaking up praise from brass. He was still in the hangar, sleeves rolled up, sketching out improvements. Because to him, it wasn't done. Every enemy ship sunk meant he was one step closer to ending a war that had taken everything from him. You can't overstate how wild his approach was for the time. The U.S. military in the early 1940s wasn't exactly known for flexibility. Doctrine ruled. Chain of command was sacred. You didn't modify aircraft without approval, period. But Gunn wasn't just tweaking a part here and there. He was re-engineering entire systems. The weight distribution alone, when you bolt 8 heavy .50 caliber machine guns to the nose of a plane, can throw off flight dynamics. It's not just point and shoot. You have to recalculate the whole center of gravity, reinforce structures, and reconfigure firing systems. Otherwise, the plane becomes unstable, or worse, a flying coffin. But Gunn wasn't some rogue dreamer. He knew exactly what he was doing. Before the war, he'd worked as an aircraft mechanic. He could fly, yes, but more importantly, he could build. He knew where to cut, where to brace, and how to keep a bomber flying with a completely new roll strapped to its face. Trial and error was his lab. And the battlefield, that was the proving ground. And here's the thing, his ideas didn't stop at just turning bombers into strafers. Gunn and his collaborators tested configurations, weights, bomb loads, gun placements, treating each aircraft like a prototype. He even worked on ways to enhance skip bombing effectiveness. Everything was customized, optimized, tuned like a race car. This was innovation born out of urgency. Gunn didn't have time to wait for a research committee. The war was happening now. Troops were dying now. His family, still out there somewhere. Every delay, every unnecessary meeting, every form to file that was time he couldn't afford. So he bypassed the red tape and went straight to impact. And boy, did it leave an impact. After the Bismarck Sea, reports started filtering back to Allied command. Convoy annihilated. Ships broken apart by bombs that skipped across the water like they had minds of their own. Enemy gunners taken out before they could even return fire. Medium bombers acting like attack fighters. At first, there was disbelief. Was this luck? Was it a fluke? But as more missions followed, with the same brutal success, the evidence was undeniable. That's when attitudes shifted. Slowly, grudgingly, commanders started to realize they had something special, someone special on their hands. Gunn wasn't some cowboy. He was a tactician, an innovator, a difference maker. And sure, they started giving him a bit more freedom, a little more leeway. But even then, the official recognition was late. Post-war, his story wasn't front-page news. He wasn't paraded as a hero. In fact, if not for General George Kenney's biography, a lot of people might never have known his name. But inside military circles, his work spoke volumes. The Strafer B-25 became a blueprint for what attack aircraft could be: multi-role, heavily armed, and low-flying. That concept didn't go away. It evolved. Flash forward to Vietnam. The AC-47 Spooky, the AC-130 Spectre. Those weren't just new inventions, they were spiritual successors. Flying gun platforms designed to bring overwhelming firepower with surgical accuracy. Gunn's DNA was in those designs. His unorthodox approach had become doctrine. What used to be illegal was now standard operating procedure. Think about that. A man who broke the rules because he had to ended up creating the rules for a whole new era of air combat. But as always, there's a cost. And it's not just measured in metal and missions. Gunn's story carries a weight because behind every innovation was the same driving force: personal loss. His family's capture in the Philippines wasn't just a footnote. It was the fuse. He poured every ounce of grief, rage, and resolve into these planes. He wasn't trying to reinvent military aviation for glory. He was doing it to get home faster, to hurt the enemy before they hurt someone else, to make it count. That kind of motivation, it doesn't come from orders. It comes from the gut. And maybe that's why his story hits so hard. It's not a tale of medals or careerism. It's about someone who refused to accept limits on what a plane could do, on what a war could be, on how fast they could make a difference. He didn't ask for recognition. He asked for tools, time, trust, and when he didn't get them, he built the future anyway. Even years later, his impact was still rippling. The U.S. Air Force eventually honored him by naming a training facility after him, a fitting tribute, sure. But for Gunn, the real legacy was always going to be the work itself. The ships that didn't make it, the troops who did. And let's not forget, the impact wasn't just physical. It was psychological. The enemy started adapting because of what Gunn did. When Japan had to reroute its entire supply chain under cover of darkness, that wasn't just logistics, it was defeat. The kind you feel in your bones. Gunn didn't need to lead squadrons into battle. He made sure they had the tools to win before they even took off. So where does that leave us? We love to mythologize war heroes, the aces, the generals, the faces on recruiting posters. But maybe the real game changers look more like Pappy Gunn. Quiet, driven, stubborn, covered in grease and working under a hanger lamp, trying to solve the unsolvable. Not for glory but because someone had to. And it raises a bigger question: how much innovation are we leaving on the table because we're scared to break the rules? Gunn proved that the battlefield isn't always one with the biggest bomb or the fastest plane. Sometimes it's one with a wrench, a wild idea, and the willingness to bet it all on doing things differently. He wasn't supposed to modify those planes. He did it anyway. He wasn't supposed to pioneer a new bombing technique. He did it anyway. And he definitely wasn't supposed to change the course of a war. But yeah, he did that too. If that doesn't earn your respect, nothing will. There's something strangely poetic about Pappy Gunn's legacy, how a man working outside the system ended up redefining the system itself. He didn't wait around for permission. He didn't beg for resources or approvals. He just solved the problem. And the problem was deadly: how to stop Japanese naval convoys from reinforcing their positions across the Pacific. These weren't just boats. They were lifelines carrying fuel, ammo, men, and momentum. If the Allies couldn't cut them off, the war would drag on, island after island, battle after battle, with no end in sight. But Gunn looked at that problem and thought, we've got these B-25s, right? They're fast, reliable, and built to drop bombs from altitude. But that wasn't working anymore. The Japanese were adapting, and the bombs were missing. Gun realized that to win, the Allies couldn't just bomb from above, they had to get down in it. Low, fast, aggressive. So he threw out the manual. He turned those bombers into strafing monsters fitted with a terrifying wall of forward firepower that would light up anything in its path. No more high passes and hopeful drops. The new B-25 stove in low, guns blazing, then bounced bombs right off the ocean like deadly skipping stones. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't elegant. But it worked. And it worked so well that Japan had to give up an entire tactic. After Bismarck Sea, they stopped running convoys in daylight. That's not just a tactical adjustment, that's a strategic retreat. That's a nation realizing it's no longer safe to move supplies in the open. Gun didn't just sink ships. He shattered confidence. And still his name isn't the one plastered across history books. Because Gun wasn't one for politics or pomp. He didn't play the game. He played to win. His lab wasn't a polished office, it was a hangar full of tools, wire oil, and bullet-riddled prototypes. The kind of place where results mattered more than rank. And maybe that's why so many people in the upper echelons didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't polished. He wasn't obedient. He was just right. That's the uncomfortable truth about innovation in wartime. The biggest breakthroughs rarely come from the top. They come from people like Gun who see what needs to be done and do it, even if it breaks every rule in the book. It's easy to forget that military history isn't just shaped by battles and treaties, it's shaped by outliers. People who challenge the accepted way of doing things. People who push, who question, who rewire the machine from the inside. And in Pappy Gun's case, he did it while carrying a weight most of us can't even imagine. His family, taken by the enemy. His country, under siege. His tools, limited. His time, running out, but he made it count. He turned grief into fuel, anger into action, and desperation into one of the most effective aerial attack strategies of the entire war. By the time his innovations filtered up through the chain of command, it was already too late for the Japanese convoys. They'd been torn apart by modified bombers they didn't see coming, and Gun's fingerprints were all over every flaming wreck. In the end, what Pappy Gun gave the Allies wasn't just firepower, it was speed. The war in the Pacific was long, brutal, and costly, but with Gun's tactics, the pace shifted. The Allies could strike harder, faster, lower. They didn't have to wait for better equipment. Gun made the equipment better. So the next time you hear about the Pacific Theater, about Midway, Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal, remember this. Behind every major victory were smaller, grittier ones. The ones made in hangars, in workshops, in the minds of people like Gun. He didn't have a grand strategy or a fleet at his command. But he had an idea and he refused to let bureaucracy kill it. And that's what changed everything. If this story blew your mind like a .50 caliber burst across the bow, hit that like button. Comment below with your favorite lesser-known war innovators or tell us what part of Gun's legacy hit hardest. And make sure you subscribe, because these stories, they're just getting started. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, you're officially part of the small percentage of people who don't just click away, and that means a lot. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts, your ideas, or even what you'd like to see next. I read every single one of them, and your feedback genuinely shapes the direction of this channel. If you enjoyed the video, tap that like button, it tells YouTube this content is worth sharing. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next upload. We've got more exciting videos coming, and trust me, you'll want to be here for them. This channel is just getting started, and your support helps it grow faster than you realize. Thank you again for spending a part of your day here with me. Stay curious, stay motivated, and as always, take care of yourself. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.